We are all storytellers. Our relationship with stories starts for all of us at a very young age, whether through books or television, games, or stories told over the dinner table. We've all been shaped in many ways, inspired by the stories that touched us, scared us, or thrilled us in some way. I remember the first time I discovered the magical ability of books to transport me to another place. I was 8 and it was raining. As a child who spent most of my days outside in the woods or on the trampoline, I was incredibly bored and my sister was watching a show I didn't want to see. I disappeared into my bedroom, searching for something to do, and landed upon a gift I'd gotten that year, a book called Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of NIMH. I resisted actually opening it up for so long because who wants to read stories about rats? But there was nothing else to do, and the rain wasn't letting up, so why not? My life changed forever that day. Reality ceased to exist, and an entire world formed in my imagination. I could see every word on that page transform into places and images in my head. I took that book with me to the kitchen table, barely looking up when anyone spoke to me. I read for hours and hours until my neck hurt from staying in the same position for too long. And when I'd finished, my heart still racing, I was changed forever. Sure, I'd read books before at school, but this was the first time I'd gone somewhere else entirely. I loved it, and I wanted more of it. Eventually, my passion for story turned into a passion for telling stories of my own. A dream come true, really, but over time, it's easy to get caught up in the marketing and the business of being a writer, which I feel can dampen that passion for stories. Also, it's often true for me that a certain story will spark an idea, but then days later, I'll forget it. My mind gets too full, too fast, and the idea is forgotten. So with a desire to capture these sparks before they're lost, I'm creating a story inspiration journal, a place to journal about my favorite stories from the past and to track the stories I'm consuming now, my favorite characters, my favorite twists, the best endings, the openings I loved, battle scenes that were amazing, all of it. In this journal, I'll keep track of my thoughts on character archetypes, growth, traits I find interesting. I'll write about stories I consume through TV, movies, podcasts, games, and, of course, books and audiobooks. I'm hoping that by immersing myself in stories like I used to and encouraging my brain to turn more towards storytelling than always business and marketing and the less inspirational details of life like budgeting and arguing over meals with a toddler, somewhere in this journal, I'll find my own internal spark again. On this intro page, I've included some of, though definitely not all, of the types of stories that have meant something to me in the past. So there's Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of NIMH, which you may know from a movie called The Secret of NIMH, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, The Matrix, Fable, video games, all of it has played some role in my imagination. And it's really interesting to see that sometimes the spark for an idea can come from the most unusual places, unexpected places. So when I finally decided to write a book to self-publish for myself back in 2010, I decided to binge watch different shows on Netflix because I wasn't sure which story I wanted most to explore. I had ideas from everything from zombies to fantasy to thrillers to mysteries, and I wasn't sure where my heart really was at the time. So I searched for story inspiration in the best way that I knew how at the time, which was inside the stories that other people have told and told well. And I happened to turn on a teen-related show called Veronica Mars. I had never watched it before, and the series at the time was complete. So I started watching and I could not stop. I binged over the course of several days. This girl who was popular turned outcast, trying to solve the mystery of what really happened to her best friend and what really got her father, who was the sheriff at the time, into hot water, and whether he was right or wrong. And it's a story of loyalty, of a snarky outcast trying to find her way. And I was so inspired by that story and by not only the character of Veronica Mars, but also the actress, Kristen Bell, and the way she portrayed that character. And so as I was watching, I started making a vision board of all the elements that I liked about that particular story, but also about other stories that I'd paid attention to. Because while Veronica Mars was awesome, I also loved witches and magic, and I knew I wanted to write something that was magical. So over the course of a few days, I came up with this idea of what if I had a character who was snarky, just like Veronica, maybe an outcast in her school or in her life in some way, but that was presented with a mystery, possibly a murder mystery that she needed to solve, and she could use her magic or her abilities in some way to solve it. And at first, the idea was to make it more of a detective kind of story. And as I began writing it, it morphed into a fantasy that now I've been writing for more than 12 years of my life. And there are 17 books in that story world. So one afternoon of just randomly picking something on Netflix created more than a decade and over, a million words of my imagination turned into story. And though the final story turned out to be nothing really like Veronica Mars per se, there was a spark there that I wanted to explore. As I get busier with my business and my YouTube channel and having 2 young kids at home and a house to maintain and so much more responsibility in my life, it gets harder and harder to find those precious afternoons where I feel like I can allow myself to really just sit down and pick a story and have no expectations and just immerse myself in it. And I think that this is one reason why my writing has suffered over the past few years since I started YouTube and had a child. It's just that I don't allow myself the daydreaming time. So my hope with this journal is to get back to those fun ideas. So I've got a section at the beginning of the journal for keeping track of books I've bought, games I want to play, podcasts I want to listen to, TV shows to watch, that sort of thing. And then I'll mark them off as I actually consume them. But then what I'm doing here on this section is I am actually creating my first spread for a story that I've recently consumed that I want to journal my thoughts about. And that is a game called The Quarry. So I played this on my Xbox Series X recently, and it's a survival horror game that's almost like you're playing through a movie. So it's that sort of idea of choose your own adventure where you get to play different multi-POV characters and you get to make choices, but a lot of it is also cinematic. And so you're watching, and then every once in a while you get to play through one of the characters. And I am just printed out a bunch of their photos from the game, and I'm going to journal about each of these characters, what archetypes I feel like they fit into, what I liked about their characters, what I didn't like about their characters. And then also I'm going to journal a little bit about the storyline. And what's interesting about this particular game is that depending on the choices you make, there are just infinite number of choices of how the story can actually turn out. So I want to make some notes on that. I'll probably also make a thread on the first game that I loved from this producer, which was called Until Dawn, and has highly inspired the book I'm currently working on, The Disappearance of Vanessa Shaw. Another thing that my husband and I are currently consuming and watching every night when we get a chance before bed is an anime called Death Note. And this is not by any means a newer anime. It's older, and my husband has already seen it before, but it's something I've always wanted to watch. So I'm making a spread for this as well, where I can not only track what episode we're on, but where I will also add my thoughts later about these characters, about the storyline, about where I think this particular pieces of the story map in terms of storytelling. And when it comes to anime or TV series, it's not always easy to fit it into like a 3-act structure. But when I do get to watching movies, something else I plan to do with this journal is to mark down where's the act 1 climax, where is that midpoint moment, where's the argument against transformation, and all of those kind of plot points, because I've found that one of the best ways to continue to increase my own skill and knowledge as a writer is to consume the stories of other people, especially in the genres that I enjoy, and take note of how did they do certain things, and do I like the way they did it? Where is an example of the argument of transformation in this story, and did it come off well, or was it seem too forced? Did it fit into the rest of the story? And really start to make notes about the things that I like about certain stories and the things that I don't. So this journal is going to be a place for me to keep track of my favorite quotes, my favorite characters, books, everything from games to podcasts, and everything I enjoy about storytelling. So let's take one last look through this journal. So in this front part, I am planning to maybe put a washi dashboard, something pretty here and decorative. Then I just have these title page story inspiration journal, and of course a collage of some of the favorite stories that I have, like Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of Nim, The Wheel of Time, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and lots of other stories that have inspired me over the years. Then I have a section for books to read. So this is where I plan to put what's currently on my bookshelf, or series I want to read, audiobooks I've purchased that I want to listen to, and just any books that are on my TBR, and I'll check them off as I actually read them. Then I have a section for TV series that I want to watch, or anime that have been on my list to watch. Some podcasts either I've been listening to and haven't finished yet, or that I want to listen to, movies I want to watch, and then games I want to play. So this can be games that I've already purchased or ones that I want to play through. And then I have a section here for books read, because I thought it would be nice to have a collection of all the book covers of the books that I have been reading. So I'll put those there. And then I also have what I'm thinking is maybe putting some page numbers so that underneath each image I can put what page number it was on. This journal doesn't naturally have page numbers, but I can add them. And then of course I'm going to put spreads of things as I'm actually consuming them, so I can put my notes. So we've got The Quarry here, and I can write about the characters. We've got Death Note. And then I may add another spread for Death Note, depending on if I feel like I have a lot that I still want to journal. But in the future, beyond that, I plan to both create spreads for everything that I'm reading or watching currently, but also for things that I've previously loved, like Jason Bourne or The Matrix, or any other type of series that I've read, that I've loved, that I want to journal about the characters. Or maybe I'll make lists of my top favorite heroines of all time, or different things like that, hoping that By the end of it, this journal will be filled with ideas and inspiration. It'll be nice and chunky, and that I'll have re-sparked my own creative energy. So if you want to create one for yourself, don't worry about making it beautiful or any kind of specific notebook. Just start making lists of the stories that you consume, and eventually it will turn into the stories that you want to create.